And I'm going to start broadcasting. Please give it a 5 count and then take it away.
Good afternoon. This is Rose McKinney, co-chair for the Goodfellows, PRSA College of Fellows. We're glad to have you with us this afternoon on our How to Apply for the College of Fellows. Joining me today on the call, we have Lauren McCarter, our PRSA staff liaison, Geri Evans, chair of College of Fellows, and my co-chair, Janet Oppenheimer, who will be helping with the Goodfellows process. Next slide, Lauren. Today we're going to cover off on quite a few things in our hour together. We are going to talk about what it means to be a fellow PRSA, why you might want to pursue this, how you go about applying for it, when you should start preparing, what's involved in the process, who can help you, and where you can get additional resources. But before we go into all of those details, and I want to remind you that this is being recorded today, so a couple of things: you'll have access to this information after the webinar. Please put your phone or your laptop on mute so that we don't have extra sounds going on. And please refer back to the website for all of the documents and things that we talk about today. So with that, I'm going to ask Geri to give us a little bit of background on College of Fellows and what it is. And then at that point, Janet and I'll jump in and start talking about the application.
Next slide. Thank you so much, Rose. And Lauren, I think there may be just a little bit of housekeeping. What about if people have questions?
Yes, thank you for asking. Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren McCarter at PRSA headquarters. If you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A panel throughout. You can ask questions at any time. We will not be responding to them until the end of the presentation.
Just type them out, and that will be beautiful. Thank you. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy that you're interested, whether this is your first or third or 10th webinar. I know that I listened to 4 of them before I finally took the plunge. We are just glad that you are here and that you're interested. Our College of Fellows is 30 years. This is our 30th year, and it's such an exciting time for us as we continue to explore and even morph our mission and our vision. From the very beginning, the idea was that the fellows would add value to PRSA, and particularly, of course, to PRSA members as they were advancing their career and at the same time advancing our profession. So our goal and our opportunity and our mission and vision is that we will find and honor and respect and make use of the talents of the very most talented people in our society, that we'll provide and encourage and solicit their achievement, that we will tap into their superior knowledge and their ethical leadership, and that we will work together to advance our profession. We do that through celebration, and that celebration is the highest distinction that a PRSA member can achieve, and that would be the achievement of becoming a fellow. Next slide. As we look, next slide, Lauren, thank you. Again, I mentioned it's our 30th year. It is the highest distinction that's awarded. We currently have 355, about 360 active fellows. And many people have asked how many are inducted each year, and there is no set number. The last 2 years, just by chance, we've had 11 inducted in both Boston and in Austin. But previous to that, in Indianapolis, we had 23. So it depends on the size of the class and the quality of the applicants and the applications. But everyone, as you can see, and that is our goal, we will know that they have left a significant footprint on our profession. As we look at the next slide, and we understand, and we try to understand, why do we become a fellow? Why would you want to do this in the first place? Why did Rose and Janet and I and 350 others want to do this? For many of us, it is to just aspire to a higher professional level. Almost every person I've ever talked to is a fellow, and they're such wonderful colleagues, really do have a desire to pursue lifelong learning, and we can do that as fellows and through the College of Fellows. Certainly it is a professional recognition, and for me it was very much a personal goal because I started my career so much later in life, and I wanted to do that for myself. I wanted to do that as a role model for my daughters-in-law. I really wanted to even be part of that as our chapter here in Orlando was growing. So there was a sense of personal pride and accomplishment as well as a professional one. And it did boost my reputation. It certainly doesn't do anything to enhance my earnings or my bottom line, but it certainly does within our whole profession. If you would go to the next slide. We have chosen, actually Deb Radman, our past chair, chose last year as a theme, and we have continued Aspire Higher. And what does that mean in terms of becoming a fellow? If you think about what PRSA and what belonging to PRSA means and what PRSA attempts and always has attempted to do in terms of our motto, advancing the profession and the professional. We started with our PRSA students. Actually, we now start with a certificate for even our high school or our college seniors, and then PRSA students, and then with some certainly experience and interest and involvement in PRSA and in the profession, the opportunity to become an APR, and then ultimately an opportunity to become a fellow. And for some fellows, it does say your career doesn't stop here, but for some, they said this is the pinnacle, and it certainly is a huge milestone. But for others, they want to continue to inspire others and contribute and pay it forward. And so there are many, many opportunities as a fellow to do that and to continue doing that. Next slide. What are our responsibilities as a fellow? Certainly they are all the responsibilities as we have as an ethical professional. We uphold the reputation and character of the fellows of our profession. We serve as role models. We stay informed. We give back. And most of all, we demonstrate ethical judgment and behavior. And fellows actually are held to a higher standard. And you will read that and become involved with that as you apply. Next step, please. I think it is time to get back with Rose and Janet and our Goodfellows and look exactly as to what's involved in applying and what you should do in order to be prepared for October 19th of this year.
Thank you, Geri. This is Janet, and I'll be going over a few of the eligibility criteria as well as a bit about the application process itself. The eligibility requirements include being a current PRSA member, a minimum of 240 months of public relations or communications experience, and you are required to be an APR accredited in public relations. Next slide. There is definitely a special mindset as you approach and enter into the application process. The selection committee looks beyond job descriptions to see what you've done that is exceptional throughout your career. A good example is thinking of an outstanding NFL quarterback whose career record stands long after he retires. Someone such as a Brett Favre or a Tom Brady or maybe a Dan Marino versus the talented quarterback who was good enough to play in the NFL, but ended up to be just average. So think about what are the exceptional moments in your career, and will they stand long after you retire? Also, your application should reflect top-tier activities and above-average results. This is what the selection committee is looking for. On yesterday's call with our Goodfellows candidates, we talked a bit and reflected about approaching the application process, not only chronologically, but by different steps of your career and the progression of your skills in your career. I would give thought to approaching this entire career view as you go through the application process. Through the perspective or lens of what footprint or legacy you will be leaving, and actually long after you retire, the legacy you'll be leaving in public relations or the communications profession. This is, again, a very important mindset as we start our journey into the College of Fellows. And let's go to the next slide. It is important that as applicants that you download and review all information provided in the How to Apply area of the College of Fellows section of the PRSA website. And we've given you the link on this particular slide. Next slide, please. This is the overview of the application itself. Part 1 is the applicant information form. Part 2 is the 8-page narrative. And let me stress, it's not one word above or beyond, or one character beyond 8 pages. This addresses your 6 required criteria that we'll be going over. Part 3 is the 1-page summary, profile, and bio. And let me note at this point, and it's noted at the bottom of the slide, that parts 1, 2, and 3 are completed by you, the applicant, and sent as a single PDF document along with the $50 processing fee directly to PRSA headquarters. Then there is part 4, which is the chapter, district, section comment form, which is sent directly to PRSA headquarters. And lastly, part 5 are your letters of reference. These are sent directly to PRSA headquarters by the letter writers. There'll be 6 letters for new applicants and 4 letters for reapplicants. These letters will be discussed in detail a bit later in the webinar. Next slide. Now the application itself, we'll talk about criteria 1 and 2. On the 8-page narrative, the first 2 criteria will seek historical information. First will be accreditation. The date of your accreditation is needed, the dates of any APR maintenance, and a note here that PRSA headquarters can provide dates if you need of all of this. Next part of the historical section is professional experience. This is where you provide your title, employer name, a brief description of responsibilities. And let me note at this point, this is just your public relations and communications experience. Don't waste space or time on functions not related to the application. So this is the first area of professional experience. Then next is the months in each position and the time frame. All of this needs to add up to 240 months in public relations or communications positions. Please be specific with start and end dates of each job. And next, the percent of time by position spent in management, performance, or teaching communications must be added at this time. Big note here is that journalism is not public relations or communications, nor are marketing activities such as advertising and sales. Let's go to the next slide.
All right, thank you, Janet. So when you get past the first hurdle, then you move into the sections where you're going to require examples and verification. And this covers off on criteria 3 through 6. For each criterion, you're going to need to have 5 examples. And we ask you to use a format similar to the one on the right-hand side of the slide. Now, we would encourage you to come up with more than 5 examples and work with a Goodfellow to narrow it down to the best 5. Again, keeping in mind what Janet said, these don't necessarily have to be in chronological order, but it's really nice to see a selection of examples from throughout your career at different stages. So when you write up these examples, you're going to do it in a format somewhat similar to what you've done in an award, but in a much shorter narrative. You'll start with a basic situation or background, enough to give the selection committee some context. Then you'll go into the exact role that you played, using the verb or using the pronoun I. This is all about you. It's not about we. It's not about the team, but what I did, what actions, what execution. And then most importantly, the piece that the selection committee is looking for are the outcomes or the results, or as we like to say, the so what. So situation, action, outcomes. And then provide the name and contact information for someone that can speak on your behalf about the work that you've done. One hint is when you reach out to these people, and hopefully they're people you've kept in touch with, or it's an opportunity to rekindle that relationship, a lot of times applicants will send that person that brief paragraph with the situation, action, and outcome so that your verifier has the context as well for what you are sharing. That way, if the selection committee calls them, they've got the background information plus their own experience to share. Lauren, next slide, please. So continuing on with that third criteria. This specific one talks about your superior professional capability. This is really about work examples, ways that you used PR and communication. So emphasizing again the outcomes for this section, we're looking for things such as increases, market share, behavior changes, ways that objectives were met and exceeded. We want to know, for example, was this a program that was replicated because it was so successful? Did you overcome any particular barrier or resistance? Did you set or establish a new higher bar? And were there innovative strategies and tactics that helped you accomplish exceptional results? So this is the part that is most about the work that you have done, perhaps for your employer or for your clients, and really focusing on the outcomes of that work. Next slide. In the next section, Criterion 4, we are looking for how you have advanced the profession. So these are 5 examples of work that show how you have positively altered perceptions of PR or communication among those both inside and outside of our profession. These things could be insights that you have shared in books, articles, seminars, ways that you have gone about advancing or changing the perception of PR. It might be research that you've conducted or research that was leveraged by others. And it could even be work that you've done within PRSA that helped our members or professionals really advance the understanding of our profession. Next slide. In Criterion 5, we're looking at service and leadership. Again, 5 significant examples of past, current, or ongoing volunteer service. Certainly, for most of us, it's easy to point to things that we've done within PRSA at the chapter, district, or national level. What we want, though, beyond just saying that you were a committee chair or that you served on a particular task force, is that we want to see how the actions led to results, new processes, how they became part of our body of work. And also we want to see diversification and well-rounded expertise. It's also in this section that you might include things from the community, boards that you serve on, maybe you help out within school or within your faith community. So these are other opportunities to show your public relations service and leadership. And again, remember to present these in that 3-part background, action, outcomes format. Next slide. The final criterion on the application is where you talk about your role as a role model. And again, 5 examples of how you have exhibited personal and professional qualities as a role model for others. This could include mentoring, ethics training, educational activities like being guest speaker, showing support for young professionals. But we want, more importantly than just saying, I mentored this person or I did this, we want to know about the related impact. So have these people gone on to great careers? Have you been recognized with awards or citations for how your peers recognize you as a role model in our profession? And is there other outstanding public or community service that wasn't necessarily part of your employed role and didn't provide financial gain, but that where you were able to use your public relations and communications skills? So in these examples, they should not be current students or staff. They could be people that you taught or that you supervised in the past that, again, have grown in their professional role as a result of working with you. Next slide. So to summarize, Criterion 1 and 2 is historical. Criterion 3, 4, 5, and 6, this is where you provide the 5 examples each. So that's going to be 20 examples and 20 different references. To the extent possible, if you don't have mute on, please put on mute. To the extent possible, have as many different references as you can. There might be a couple of situations where you need to utilize a reference more than once. That's okay, but we are looking for variety. And make sure that you have name, current phone number, and or current email. This is so that the selection committee could call them during the process to inquire about your work and expertise. This is also the part where we want to note that as much as you may have worked very closely with a member of our PRSA staff may not be listed as a reference for your examples. And again, we recommend that you get in touch with each reference in advance, let them know that you're applying for the College of Fellows, send them your background, action, and outcomes piece so that they're familiar and they'll be ready to take a call from a selection committee member. Next slide. So the application itself is a narrative format, no more than 8 pages, 1-inch margins, Arial 11-point font. Mark each section very clearly so that the selection committee knows exactly what they're looking at. And it goes without saying, complete all sections, so not 4 examples, but 5, and get it to us on time. And you'll see at the bottom of each slide, the due date application, it is 5 p.m. Eastern on May 2nd. Next slide. So we have a few tips. Like everything, read the application and all of the instructions very carefully. Start early. Some of you may have already started. Some of you were at ICON in October and you've already been thinking about this, but there's still plenty of time to start today. Make sure that you explain the role that you played, using I, not we, to describe your involvement. Focus on the results, always answering so what. Provide the 5 strongest and different examples for each criteria, 3 through 6. Try to tell a story. So again, think back to silver anvils that you've written and other awards. Draw us in so that we understand. Proofread, 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 edit, edit, edit. And now I'll start to make a plug for one of the best resources that we offer to you, and that is to get a Goodfellow. Your Goodfellow, and we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes, is available to answer your questions, as well as Janet and I are available as the Goodfellow co-chairs to answer your questions and provide some guidance as you go through this application. Next slide. There are some other elements that will also be helpful. There is an applicant information form that you will complete. It will have all of your contact information, membership information, and you will provide to PRSA the names of the people who are going to write your letters of recommendation, and then you sign that. We also ask in advance that you put together a 35-word summary profile and a 150-word formal biography. These are pieces of content that we will use if you are inducted into the College of Fellows at our ceremony in the fall. and an application fee, and this can be completed online at PRSA. Next slide. Let's talk about these letters of support. There are 6 of them total. The first 4 letters are going to be one-page letters that are written by a public relations or communications professional or educator. They have to be written on that person's company or letterhead, and they're going to describe your personal and professional qualities and how they know you. A couple of tips here. We're not looking for them to regurgitate your application. We are looking for them to add color, to add an anecdote, to really speak to your character and to help your application come to life for the selection committee. So think carefully about who you select. Ask early, because folks can only write one letter for an applicant. Then you will have a letter from a non-PR or communications professional. So again, this needs to be a senior level executive, a faith leader in your community, maybe the executive director of a board that you serve on, a client, somebody that's not in a PR capacity that could write on your behalf. And same thing, we're looking for additional color and character. And then the final letter is going to come from either your chapter, section, or district. And it will be accompanied by a comment form that provides an assessment of you as an applicant. Next slide. A couple of things. There are some restrictions. A letter writer may endorse only one person each year. The only exception to this is that your chapter, section, or district officer can complete multiple comment forms and letters. So for example, if you have more than one person from your chapter applying this year, of course your officer can write more than one letter. There are some folks that cannot write letters. We cannot accept letters from anybody that is currently serving on the PRSA Board of Directors. We cannot have letters from any of the College of Fellows officers or members of the selection committee. Your Goodfellow cannot write a letter for you. However, your Goodfellow can write a letter for another applicant. And last but not least, PRSA staff cannot write a letter on your behalf. Next slide. Successful letters. Get to those letter writers early. Someone yesterday on the Goodfellows training call said that when you make the ask to your letter writers, it is a nice commitment for yourself to inspire you through the process to get through it. So get those letter writers signed up early. As you're thinking about who to ask, make sure that they know you well. Make sure that they have the appropriate stature. For example, the selection committee loves to see letters from APRs and other fellows. And make sure that they can share your strengths. Red flags. Again, we don't want them to just repeat and regurgitate your resume. If you have nobody that's an APR or fellow write on your behalf, that would be a red flag. They don't all have to be APRs and fellows, but let's have some mix in there. Another red flag would be if for some reason your chapter, section, or district declined to comment on you or doesn't feel that they know you well enough to write on your behalf. And again, if the letter is better than your own application or it doesn't reinforce your own narrative. So make sure that you're thinking carefully about who you select for your letter writers. Next slide. Next slide, Lauren. All right, Geri, as a past leader of the selection committee, will you tell our folks about the really cool rubric that is available to them now?
I would love to, and I want to reassure everyone who's on the call that there never has been, nor is there now, or will be, some kind of hidden code, something that we don't want anyone to know about in terms of how selections are made. We really and truly want this to be an inclusive and a transparent process. At the same time, we respect confidentiality. And at the same time, also, we are looking for the top professionals. We are looking for those who have had an outstanding career. If we could just go back as you look at these rubrics and as I explain them and go through this, I just want you to return to the mindset Janet was talking about early on in the presentation, the idea that this is, you are leaving a footprint. You know, if at the application, everybody got selected who just completed the application, or the application was that easy, not very rigorous, or we just selected everybody who did his or her job, there would be no distinction, no honor involved. And so the selection committee, there are 15 members of the selection committee, and each one goes through each application with this rubric in mind. So if you start at the end and work towards it, I think you'll have even a greater chance for success. So let's look at everything is rated on a 1 to 5 scale, or almost all of these. And so we go through each of those criteria that Janet and Rose have explained. And so we start with experience, and 5 would mean that throughout we could see in the application a continued progression of responsibilities and of achievements, and that each job, as we look at your resume, we can see that there were promotions and that you did indeed increase your visibility and your leadership as you went throughout your career. So we start there, and then we look at criteria 3, which is professional capability. And I'll just continue to reiterate what has already been said, and that is the outcomes. Were things duplicated, replicated? Have you left a mark in some way? Did you overcome barriers that were in a creative and a professional and ethical way? And so that the scale 1 through 5 will be used. And for example, if the selection committee, we do this individually and then we do it, folks, collectively on a call, so that we can absolutely ask questions of each other. Why did you think that person deserved a 5 on this particular criteria, and I thought it was a 3 or a 4? And so we ask questions like, well, yeah, they did their job, but there wasn't, maybe 1 out of the 5 examples showed some great outcomes, but the others were just, yeah, I did the work, and people liked it. Those of you in education that may be wondering, how do we evaluate those? Again, it's wonderful and important to say that through student satisfaction surveys or classroom surveys, the students ranked me 4.8 out of 5, but were you asked to repeat that class? Were in some way, do you have quotations from students that would show that you were an outstanding instructor? How did you go above just doing your job or doing the job that you wanted to do, but in some way you really made an impact? And that would be true then on each of the criterion. Advancing the profession, both inside the profession and even outside. Were you a member of another organization where you could show the value of public relations and use it in an impactful way? So always looking for measurable and positive outcomes. Service and leadership, this is where, and I know 2 or 3 people have asked the question, can I use experience elsewhere? And indeed, while it's wonderful to show, and it's important to show PRSA service and leadership, all 5 examples should not just be PRSA, but rather you've made an impact across the communities and the peoples that you have served and led, or have been on a board, or have been in service with. The same with role model. Again, we've had some applications where the person just said, well, I mentored X student, and they went on to graduate from college. Well, hopefully we've all done that. But what have you shown, and in what way was it outstanding? How did you make a difference? How did you take this student who needed help, or who needed your guidance, or a young professional, and help them see the profession and see opportunities and help move them towards leadership? So continuing, the 5s are those people where consistently all 5 examples show outstanding outcomes and impact and footprint. You would end up with a 3 perhaps if you did it a couple times. And it is possible, and it has happened, where some of the criterion have only received a 1 or 2 because, quite frankly, they were minimal and just above average, not even above average, just someone doing his or her job. May I just make a mention here with the role model also, you may include, as you heard, awards and recognition, but don't just list the award, because the selection committee wouldn't know the impact or the significance of that award. but why were you given that award, and what does it stand for, and how many have been given, and what makes this outstanding? That's what moves you towards the 5 on that scale. Next slide as we finish the criterion here. The same with your letters. We do look at the letters, and we want to see whether or not those people have, if we get a sense as a selection committee that they knew you and that they knew how outstanding you were. So a variety of senior level people, fellows and APRs, yes, it does matter. Not all of them have to be that, but it does matter that you have worked with and have caught the attention of senior leadership. And then your non-PR person, again, that it's very specifically non-PR. And let me again caution my dear educators, I was an educator as well, and even though I was in a communication department and my department chair happened to be in the School of Journalism, and journalism moments don't count for our 240 months, there was really a fine line there between, was that a non-PR person? Much better to have selected someone else in the community. And most of the time you have served on a board or have been active in some outside organization, and that's where you should look for your non-PR letter. But again, did that letter show the support and show the knowledge of you and what you've done? The same again with your chapter and your district letter and those comments by your board. And then finally, we do check references. And I heard Rose say, and I will reiterate, let the people know that you are listing them as a reference, that they may be called. And some folks were absolutely, we've heard, were disappointed when they weren't called, but a selection committee member will have 1 or 2 candidates to vet much more closely than anyone else will. And that will include a series of phone calls. So it may be somebody from your district, somebody that the selection committee member knows in your district, or who would know somebody who knows you. And then indeed they will call 2 or 3 or maybe 5 out of your 20 references to ask to go further into whatever that role and responsibility was and the outcomes of the example that you gave. So please alert people, because we have had some very embarrassing phone calls where I would call and say, I'm calling on so-and-so who's applied for the College of Fellows, and they think that I'm interviewing for a job and have hung up. There really have been some roadblocks sometimes that were unnecessary if the applicant would have paved the way ahead of time. So I just wanted to let you know this is something that's fairly new in terms of really sharing it with everyone, putting it out so that everyone can see and can work. As I said, some people say, you know, work with the end in mind. And of course, your end is to have a 5 on each of these scales, or on each of these criteria. Thank you. I think next slide, please. And Rose, would that be you who'll take this?
Yes, Rose is up.
I will continue on. So some folks that have recently completed the fellows application process, they all said that one of the best things they could do is exactly what you're doing right now, and that is participate in today's webinar. To get committed to the process and start early, request a Goodfellow and interact frequently, to pick your best work examples, and of course focus on those measurable results, write succinctly, edit, edit, edit. Don't procrastinate, because this does take some time. Stay on top of your letter writers. So, and make sure that you engage with your chapter, section, and district right away. Proofread, read and heed all instructions. So the nice thing is, we're starting here in January. It's due May 2nd. You know, you have a few months to get through this. If you peck away at it week after week, you will definitely have time to complete a strong application. Next slide. Now let's talk about some resources that are available to you. And next slide. Let's talk about Goodfellows. So Goodfellows are people who have been through the process just like you and are members of the College of Fellows. They are specially trained and they are prepared each year that they serve. They are your coach. They will take you through the application process. They're neutral. They provide sort of that extra knowledgeable set of eyes. But keep in mind, they are not editors and producers. They are going to ask you questions. They are going to push you to aspire higher, and they're going to be a guide for you. Now, they are assigned. Janet and I will be assigning Goodfellows if you would like one. You don't pick them yourself. They are assigned so that we can match background, interest, experience, and we try to find somebody that's not in your market, but that does have complementary skill sets and experience so that they can be very objective and they can ask you those questions that won't be immediately understood if they lived in your same market. Next slide. So Goodfellows, coaches, motivators, encouragers, ask you questions, cross-examine, play devil's advocate. They will be editors in that they'll look at content and flow and maybe advise on things that are stronger or weaker, but they're not going to rewrite things for you. They're not going to go through with track changes and edit. Next slide. Now, a Goodfellow is not part of the selection committee, so they cannot ensure your selection. As we said earlier, they cannot write a letter of support for you. They could write one for a different candidate. And of course, they're not going to sign off or write your application or approve it. So those are just some things to keep in mind. They're also not your parent. They're not going to say, hey, time for another draft. Hey, check in with me. It's up to you to lead that relationship and to make sure that you're staying in touch with them throughout the process. Next slide. There are some really important dates to keep in mind. Starting now, today, you can request a Goodfellow. Simply send an email, goodfellows@prsa.org, and along with that request, submit your resume. With your resume, and this is really important, please include the number of months in a PR communications role and the percentage of time in that role, either teaching or managing the PR communications function. So we're looking for a tally of months as well as the percentage. If you send that to us, we will move forward to find a Goodfellow match for you. The last date to request a Goodfellow is March 14th by midnight. So you got a couple of months here to do that, but everyone tells us, and I can speak from personal experience, a Goodfellow will really make the difference in your application process and your experience. It's just so nice to have an objective person that can encourage you, but also provide feedback throughout the process. Next slide.
Okay, I'm going to pop in here and talk a bit about what Goodfellows are saying. As you've just heard, the relationship with you and the Goodfellow is really critical to your application process and making a successful go at it. We've listed a few nice testimonials from our fellows. Let's look at Nance Larson, APR fellow PRSA. Nance says, being a Goodfellow is an amazing experience that provides insight to the accomplishments of incredible public relations professionals. It's a journey that's thought-provoking, motivating, and truly inspiring. Joette Storm, APR fellow PRSA, adds, being a Goodfellow allows me to maintain and expand my PRSA connections. It provides a peek into the working lives of those members rising through the ranks with creative ideas and execution. And Liz Oliphant, APR fellow PRSA, says, I get to follow the careers of practitioners in other parts of the country and learn from the work they've done. It's free continuing education. And I'd like to add one more testimonial, not from a Goodfellow, but from a College of Fellow applicant, Denise Blackburn Gay, APR fellow PRSA, who was a 2008 inductee. And she wrote about her process of going through becoming a College of Fellow. And she says, about the application process. The application process for the College of Fellows was probably one of the most meaningful events in my 30 years of public relations. We seem to glide through our careers without thinking about the impact of our work, and not thinking about the impact our work has had on the businesses we represent, our communities, or even us for that matter. This provided an occasion to reflect on those moments. And I think that says it all. Next slide, please. There are many resources at your disposal to take advantage of as you're going through the application process. First, going back to the PRSA website, all necessary forms are located on the How to Apply area in the College of Fellows section. Please make sure you download and review all forms and the application instructions. There are frequently asked questions and tips available. And if today's webinar is being recorded, and if you want to go back and refamiliarize yourself with any part of this, anything we've all gone over today, please feel free to do so. And of course, having your Goodfellow. That's one of the best resources you could have. Next slide. And then we have our people resources. And both Rose and I, as your Goodfellow co-chairs, are available at any time for questions and as resources for you. And also Lauren McCarter from PRSA. She's our staff liaison. Lauren is available to you as well. And now I'll turn it back to Rose to talk about the important dates. Next slide.
All right. Well, we hope that you guys are all very encouraged and ready to embark upon this journey. And the first couple of things really are web right now going on. You're getting all of that background information that you need to continue on this process. Between the 18th, you can request a Goodfellow, and we connect you with someone to help you through the process. Just remember to make that request through of time spent in PR communications positions. And then the application is due.
Let me see. Can you hear me? Can the others hear me? Oh.
Hi, Janet. Yes, we're able to hear you.
We've had some technical difficulties with Rose's. I'm not sure she can hear everyone.
And approval, and by late July, all of them for those.
Everyone, I'm going to briefly mute Rose, and Janet, would you mind reviewing these dates that Rose was taking over? Thank you.
Sure. If everyone can hear me, let's go over the important dates, which is today. And thank you all for being on the call. And that's on how to apply. Our next important date is March 14th, which is the last day that the Goodfellow assignments can be requested and provided to us. May 2nd, the applications are due at PRS headquarters by 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Then what will happen is by mid-May to mid-June, the selection committee will be screening, and that's the timeline for the screening process. And by late June, the selection committee then deliberates. By mid-July, the PRSA board reviews and approves the applications. And by late July, the new fellows will then be notified. And of course, the big date, October 19th, our new fellows will be inducted at the PRSA International Conference in San Diego. Next slide.
All right, this is Rose again. Hopefully the connection and recording goes smoothly here. If not, Janet or Geri will jump in again. All right, so what is a good timeline for meeting that May 2nd deadline? Well, right now through early February, request that Goodfellow and reach out to your letter writers. If you can get that done here in the next couple of weeks, you'll be well on your way. By mid-March, it's great to have that first draft of your application to your Goodfellow for review. Take a couple of weeks to incorporate the feedback and get a second draft back to your Goodfellow by the end of March. Then by early to mid-April, incorporate those final comments, get a final draft put together for your Goodfellow. Check in with your letter writers, make sure that they are on track to get that letter in by the May 2nd deadline. And then spend the end of April doing all of your editing, proofreading, formatting. Remember, 8 pages, 1-inch margin, 11-point Arial font. Double check with PRSA headquarters to make sure that your letters are coming in, and then email or overnight your application to PRSA headquarters ahead of that May 2nd deadline. And then once it's all in on May 2nd, everything's received, sigh of relief, go out and celebrate, and let the selection committee take on the next part of the process on your behalf. And regardless, feel really good about the time that you took to reflect on your career and the impact that it's had and the opportunity to capture it in that application for us. We hope that you'll be as grateful for the process as we are for your application. Next slide. So we will take questions. Remember to submit those using the Q&A on your webinar screen. Lauren is going to read those questions to us, and we will answer those for everyone's benefit. But as you can see here, these are some pictures from the recent celebration in Austin. We had a lot of fun, and we hope that you'll be able to join us for that as well in San Diego this year coming up. Next slide.
There isn't a next slide. I'm going to take it back so we can look at those lovely pictures. We have a few questions already, and I'm going to go ahead and read off the first one. Does volunteer board leadership experience outside of the communications world matter?
Absolutely. That experience is complementary to the experience you have in your employment. Just making sure, however, though, that when you have that outside board experience, that you can speak to the communications or PR role that you played in that situation.
Great. We have a couple more. What if previous employer/project contacts are deceased? I've worked for tiny nonprofits over 30 years, and often there was only one contact, no longer alive or no longer reachable.
Geri, do you want to take this one from the selection committee perspective?
I certainly will, and I need to let you know, whoever answered or asked that question, or if any of you are wondering, that also happened to me because I used an experience very early in my career and could not find anyone. The real key is to try to find someone that maybe was involved in the project, even though it might not be your boss, but hopefully one of the clients, somebody you impacted. I ended up having to do a considerable, thank goodness for the internet and for Google search and Zaba search and all the rest, looking for people and trying to find someone that I might have worked with, making some phone calls and reconnecting with folks I hadn't talked to in 20 years. It was really, that's why I think it's so incredible that it's part of this journey, and it's a huge journey. Indeed, if there is absolutely, positively no one and you have tried, then you do have to say everyone, it was a small nonprofit, and everyone involved in this project or my staff is now deceased. But the most important thing is to try to make every effort to come at it at a different way. Somebody you might have impacted, somebody who was impacted by somebody, someone who might remember what your role was. But I know that may not be possible for all 20. You just would not like to have a majority of those, or even 25% of those with person is deceased.
One question that I can respond to, will the slide presentation be available on the PRSA website? The answer to that is yes. I will be making that available by the end of the week. So we have another question regarding contacts for projects. Can you use former staff members as contacts on projects?
Our leaning would be no, because they knew you in the context of being a staff member.
Okay, great. Somebody is asking, they were very involved in the local PRSA chapter, including board membership, ethics officer, president, etc., years ago. But demand from my full-time public relations position, plus the fact that I additionally began teaching communication courses part-time at the collegiate level years ago, affected my time for involvement in chapter activities. Is that a potential negative?
That's not necessarily a negative, because your career has evolved to a new place. The main thing we would say is making sure that you still have a relationship at the chapter, district, or section level, so that those officers can at least assess you and write that letter of recommendation. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have current involvement within the chapter, district, or section.
I would add to that, in that we did have one candidate who needed to, quite frankly, put the application on hold and re-engage with her chapter so that the chapter felt comfortable writing a letter of endorsement. So I think you do want to check with your chapter or section or district and see what their level of comfort would be in supporting you. Tell the officer or the president or the immediate past president what you were doing, and ask them if they'd be comfortable doing that.
Great. Next question. I've had a 30-year career as a public relations professional and educator, and for the past year have been in a university position which is 40% focused on public relations. As long as I am able to write a strong narrative about my footprint and legacy in the profession, will this be a disadvantage in my application?
No. Again, what we're looking for is that 240 months of experience. And so if that occurred prior to what you're currently doing right now at 40% focused on PR, that's just fine. But again, to Geri's point, do make sure that you've got enough involvement or recognition within your chapter, district, and section that they feel comfortable completing that assessment and writing a letter.
And I would add that the magic number is 50%. So I appreciate the question asker who said it's only 40% focused on public relations. It does sound like you certainly have 240 months before your public relations focus decreased that you can draw from and use. And then something that you're doing now perhaps can just enhance something that you will be writing about.
Great. A couple of people have asked, if you're reapplying, can you use the same examples and letter writers?
Geri, will you take that one?
I will. I would encourage you, before we go through all of the different requirements, please just check online, because there is a very specific, here's what reapplicants need to do. And I would just reemphasize that reapplication means if it didn't work last year, the previous year, you're applying this year. So it's 2 consecutive years. If you applied, let's say 3 years ago, or started the application and there was interruption, or you weren't selected the first time, but there's been an interruption a year or more between those applications, then you're considered a new applicant. So the definition of reapplicant is consecutive years. There is a list of what you can and can't use from before and what additional requirements there are. And look for that on the website. It'll say reapplicant instructions. I think that'll be more helpful.
Great. Is it okay to be between jobs or consulting at the time of your application if you meet all of the requirements?
Absolutely fine.
Great. Does leaving the corporate side of the business to become a consultant have a negative impact? This would seem to be contrary to the requirement that candidates show continued upward mobility and responsibility/promotions.
This is Geri, and I'd be glad to answer it from a selection committee point of view. It is not a negative impact to leave. I mean, again, we'd understand, I think people would understand, because many of us have done that, why you might change careers. The real idea is, what did you do when you became a consultant? Can you show a project that demonstrated exciting or great outcomes, and where you just continued with your superior outcomes and your overcoming barriers, just showcasing how you left a footprint, even no matter what position you're in.
Okay, I have one more question, but everyone should feel free to continue to submit if you have more, but this is the last one in my docket right now. While I've been an active PR practitioner professionally for nearly 25 years, I'm also involved as an adjunct faculty member, guiding both graduate and undergrad students towards careers in PR. Is this work able to be used as a case study?
Yes, you could definitely use this as a case study, perhaps in that role model section, or maybe in advancing the profession. So just think about the way that you would set that up with the situation, the role that you played, and the outcomes of that. Great questions, everybody.
Yeah, thank you everyone for engaging. I have no further questions at this time, so I turn it over to the panelists if you have any further words to say before we close up shop.
This is Geri, and I would just like to thank everyone for their interest. I look forward to reading your applications. I look forward to having you use all of the resources available to you. Again, what we hope to do is have the most delightful, the most accomplished, and the highest achieving class. We'd love to induct you in San Diego. And in the meantime, as you enjoy this journey, this process, even this frustration, we really look forward to celebrating what you have accomplished. And once again, I want to thank Rose and Janet for being co-chairs. They will guide you. They will help you. We have a cadre of Goodfellows who are at the ready once you make that request. So good luck in your journey, and thank you for your interest, and thank you for this profession, being in this profession.
All right, thank you everyone very much for participating. I'm going to be ending the webinar now, but all of this, the recording and the slides, will be up on the website very shortly. Thank you everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.